You're welcome along to another edition of the Tide 5. We've been on a bit of hiatus for the last couple of months, but Neil Treacy's back. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad now.
So we're back with a bang, as in we're getting more in-depth and more nerdy about a few subjects this week. We're not going to go for the full 5. We're going to go for 3 things. We're going to focus Condense it, exactly. Quality over quantity. Ireland line-out, the French scrum and the Irish scrum are what we're looking at this week. So
we are kind of looking at the Tide 5.
Well, exactly.
Not necessarily 5 things.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah. That's exactly how we should have sold us in the first place.
Exactly.
So let's crack into it. We're going to start with the Irish line-out. So you've been noticing a lot of things over the last couple of weeks, and Sean Cronin was one of those people who got criticised quite a lot after the Italy game.
Yeah, so obviously everyone knows the Irish line-out didn't really have a particularly good game against Italy. Now, Sean Cronin was in for what everyone, I think, was delighted to see was finally his first Six Nations start, and it was the season he's been having as well. It was just so disappointing how the day ended up going for him. I think everyone really wanted for him to have a good game that afternoon. But on that Sunday, on Off the Ball, we had Mike Ruddock in studio watching the game with us, and he was trying to point out, he was sitting with me and he was pointing out that all the hooker's always going to get the blame for this sort of thing when the line-out isn't going too well. So basically what I just wanted to do is we had a look basically at where they were throwing the ball, and we just picked out 2 examples that on the face of it look very similar. It looks very much just like a ball is overthrown, and we're just going to kind of maybe point out how the slight difference between the 2. This first one we're going to show here, this one actually probably is an overthrow from Sean Cronin. There probably just was a little bit too much on it. So we can see there on the picture above, the little black circle at the top, that is the ball. It's kind of just blended in with the sunlight there. You can't really make it out too well, but we have another angle we'll show you in a second. But you can just see there the ball is just over the hand of Peter O'Mahony, and at that point you can see the red circle below. That's his lifting pod. He is there at absolute full extension there. O'Mahony is not going to get any higher into the air at that point, and the ball is just over his hand. It's just out of reach from him. It hasn't gone behind him, or it isn't coming too far in front of him. So if the throw is on the money, that should be coming into his hand right there.
What is on the money, Neil? Is it at the very highest point that you can possibly reach? Is it a bit lower down so that you can get full arm movement, or where is the ideal spot?
It kind of depends really how much the opposition are actually contesting it. Like if the opposition are contesting it, you probably want it up nice and high, so you can actually just get in above them, because you're going to be leading the jump. If it's uncontested, you could probably be taking it in around just kind of high chest level.
Sure.
But we have another shot there of the liner from behind it. There you see it there, and he's absolute full extension there.
Yeah,
like that is as high as he is going to possibly go, and that ball is just about above his fingertips. Now the next one we're going to show you, this is probably an example of, again, it looks like an overthrow, but there's a slight little difference, and this one is actually probably the fault of, it's probably either Quinn Roux or his lifting pod. It's kind of hard to know. It's pretty much the 3 of those people are going to be the ones that know who actually got that one wrong, but we'll just show it here now. So this is Quinn Roux up in the air, and he looks like he's at full extension as well. The ball is just above him, but he's leaning back. So basically he hasn't been able to get quick enough he hasn't been able to get up into the air reach enough to reach that throw. He's just gone too late, or maybe the lift was a little bit too slow. So even though he's at full extension, the ball is behind him at this stage, so he is having to lean back to really try grab it. And that's actually that is the line-out that Ireland lost, and it ended up leading up to one of the Italian scores, and Cronin would have got a lot of blame for that. But it's just the slight little differences between the 2. And the hooker is, if someone sees a ball flying over the top of a line-out, the hooker is automatically going to get the blame. Now I think a lot of the time as well on last Sunday, where they were placing the throws, they were trying to go towards that back third of the line out quite a lot. I was looking through them there. I only picked out, I'd say, 3 out of about 18 line outs that went into probably the first pod of the line out, the first third. Most of them were pretty much going, I think I counted about 7 that were in that kind of middle third, and another 8 then that were pretty much down at the back of the line out.
And is that the way Ireland usually operate?
I need to probably look through the rest of the games, but I think what they were trying to do pretty much was, on a lot of occasions, in particular for, I think it was later on in the game for Conor Murray's try, they went to the back of the line-out to set up a maul quite a lot. And basically what that does, it removes you from the touchline by about a further 10 yards. So it just means that it's a lot more difficult for the opposition to try edge your maul towards the touchline. and it kind of just puts you in a better field position.
It's really interesting looking at it. Like, if you're Sean Cronin in his position and you're being totally selfish, is there a tendency that you just throw the ball a little bit lower? Like, ultimately, the higher you go, the more chance you've got of not getting intercepted or anything like that, or it being a turnover. But at least it's hitting your man if you go a little bit lower. Like, just being devil's advocate there for a moment, like that Quinn Roux instance there, it's clearly not as good a lift as it could have been. But at the same time, if Sean Cronin goes lower with the throw, probably would have stuck.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's probably what you used to. Like, I don't have an example there on the screen, but just when you brought it up, there was one example when Niall Scannell came onto the pitch then, and it was actually a throw to the front. I think it was on about 65 minutes or so. And that one, I can't remember, it might have been, is it either Peter O'Mahony maybe or Alton Delan? I'd need to go back and check it again. But that one was a throw to the front. It probably was a little low down, and it was picked off by one of the Italian players.
Right.
So that's the danger you're going into with that.
Sure. In terms of personnel then, for this Sunday against France, what are you going for? Who's your hooker and who's in the second row for you?
Hooker, I'd say Rory Best will be coming back in. Ty Furlong and Cian Healy probably pick themselves at the moment as the first choice front row. And second row, if everyone's fit, I'd probably be giving Tadhg Byrne a go with James Ryan. I think Byrne showed himself when he played that game against the Ospreys for Munster a couple of weeks back. He does look fully fit now. Yeah. And he had another unbelievable game. We're talking about line-out. He's a fantastic line-out operator as well, especially on defensive line-outs. He had that pretty much a match-winning steal for Munster in the last minute of that game at the Liberty Stadium a couple of weeks ago. I'd probably be going for him alongside James Ryan there.
I think a more apt question maybe for Hooker is, how far has Sean Cronin's stock plummeted, if at all, after the Italy game?
You know, the speculation over the weekend was that it looks like himself and Sean O'Brien were the two that are probably going to be jettisoned out of the team. I'd certainly be giving Cronin another chance, at least on the bench this weekend. I think he's shown his form for Leinster this season has been absolutely incredible. I think it'll be pretty harsh to bin him after just one disappointing game like that.
Let's have a look at the French scrum. We are up against the French this weekend. What have you noticed from them so far this year?
Nothing spectacular, really. I think it was kind of hard to tell off the first game because they did change around the team a lot for the second and third matches. But I just took one look at Demba Bamba in particular, who is just one of these fantastic young French players they have at the moment coming through. He started there the last couple of games at tight head. And I'm just going to pick out here, this is one of the scrums against Scotland the last day. And looking at that, his form is actually, you can see his head is ever so slightly above his hips. Now, for a lot of people, that is actually like an invitation for a loose head prop to really come in and attack you under the chest. It's probably something that Cian Healy would be looking out for and really wanting to see. Okay. But one thing that I was very impressed with was that Bamba was able to do this, and he just clearly has so much core strength, so much muscle in his neck and strength in his neck. He was never really troubled in any way like that. Alan Dell of Scotland wasn't able to get in under him at any stage to put him under that kind of pressure. So he was able to stay up that little bit high. And I'm just going to show you one example here. We'll just roll it on to the next scrum. Now, this is just one example of one dominant French scrum in the first half of that game. So you can see there, that little arrow is Demba Bamba. He's coming in nice and straight. Ball is about to be put into the scrum. And we'll roll it on to the next one. We'll roll on. There we go. So you can see at this point the scrum has just completely caved in on his side. What he's done very, very well is he is just absolutely spliced through into the hooker. So he'll be facing this way. He will have the hooker on this side of him. He'll have his loose head prop out here, and he is just driving in like this to try cut across the hooker.
And does that bring the loose head closer to the hooker and therefore collapsing that side of the scrum?
Yeah, it just kind of drifts things out towards the left a little bit, and it kind of just negates what the loose head is doing outside of him. The loose head pretty much is trying to keep the tight head out from going into the hooker, if you know what I mean. He's trying to stop him getting in there, but Bamba just goes in there, and as you can see in that, Dell and the hooker have pretty much just caved into each other, and on the video then that scrum just rolls around and it's a France penalty.
And is there anything Cian Healy and Rory Best can do this Sunday to counteract that?
Well, I think just on the numbers anyway, and from what I've seen of the Irish scrum over the last couple of years, I don't think they'll have trouble. I wouldn't expect them to have trouble. They haven't had trouble with anyone in the last 2 years at the scrum. Okay. They haven't been. The one thing I'll say about the Irish scrum is they aren't particularly dominant. They don't absolutely walk over teams on a regular basis. But what they are exceptional at doing is getting the ball back to the base of the scrum and having it there ready to play. It's one thing Greg Feek has done brilliantly. I went through basically every Ireland game of the last, since the start of the 2017 season. So of the last 163 scrums that Ireland have had on their own feed, they've won 157 of them.
Wow.
So they've only lost the last 6 scrums in the last 2.5 years. They've lost 1 scrum in the last 2.5 Six Nations campaigns. They haven't lost a scrum on their own feed since the 3rd test against Australia last summer. So that's now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games in a row. So you're looking at, it's a 96.91 success rate on their own scrum. Someone like England, for example, they would have an excellent scrum as well. They're down around 91% is what I did for them for the last 2 years. The only thing I would say about about Ireland on opposition ball, they probably don't go after it as much as other teams.
Okay, they're a bit safer at the scrum.
Yeah, they are, but they're very safe, which is fantastic. If you're retaining the ball 96.91% of the time, you've got a proper scrum. Like, for example, they're taking out, they're turning over probably 10.86% of opposition scrums. That's 15 of the last 138 that they would have faced. Someone like New Zealand, for example, in the last 2 years, they have won back 17.5% of opposition scrums.
Right.
So they're probably a lot more dominant on opposition ball.
Yeah. And we obviously didn't concede anything against the All Blacks either.
No, we didn't. We're talking 7 games in a row where Ireland have just 6 out of 6, 5 out of 5, 7 out of 7, 9 out of 9, 3 out of 3, 10 out of 10, and it was only 1 out of 1, I think, against Italy.
That's really interesting. Like, it's something you'd expect then from the game against France. Like, if it was going to happen, I dare say it would have been against England that this trend would have been booked?
Not so much. I think England have they've a very good scrum. I think Ireland are probably up there with anyone at the moment. France have given Ireland trouble at times in the last few years. Excuse me. It is. I think though Tadhg Furlong probably would have the match for Jefferson Powra, who's probably going to start at loosehead for France. Cian Healy, if he can keep Demba Bamba quiet, I think Ireland will. I think what they'll focus on doing is just retaining the ball first and foremost. And what's been brilliant about the way Greg Feek has that scrum set up for Ireland is that the channel that the ball is coming through in the scrum is always so clear with Ireland. The amount of times that just from that little strike it comes straight back down to the number 8's feet or at the back of the scrum. Whereas a lot of teams, they're probably not getting as good a strike on the ball and they're trying to walk over it a little bit, and that's where you get into a lot of trouble. Whereas with Ireland, it's just coming so cleanly through that scrum, and that is just from absolute meticulous planning down to the inch of where the second row's feet have to be, so that they're keeping that channel free for the ball to come through and it's not getting blocked up in the traffic along the way. So that is just sheer meticulous planning that they've worked out over the last few years, and to just keep that channel perfectly clear.
It's very interesting. Is there anything else before we wrap up about the Ireland scrum for this weekend?
No, that's about it, I think.
Personnel-wise, what sort of team are you expecting? I know you've gone through the tight 5 there. Who are you expecting in the back row?
It looks like it's probably a bit early in the week to be calling it. I think it looks like CJ Stander might be available. He's been back training, I think, at the moment. There was talk about Dan Levy coming back in if he was fit enough. I know he hasn't got a run out for a long time with Leinster or anything like that. It probably is very early to be making some of those back row calls. There's Rhys Ruddock had a good outing for Leinster at the weekend. He'd been out injured as well. I think on back row it's actually just way too early in the week to be trying to call it. Yeah, probably is. I put you on the spot there. Good stuff, Neil. Thanks for that. That's a tight 5 back. What's your Twitter handle? At Neil_Treacy. If you've got any questions at all, we'd be delighted to hear any rugby nerdery queries you have. Or abuse. Come on. I'm sure there's plenty of that to go around as well. Neil Treacy, thank you very much. That's a tight 5 for this week.